Now we want to look at some raster data. So you can go ahead and turn off any of the DA or CT data. You don't need that for the moment. We're going to look at this raster layer. So an important distinction with raster data, right? There's no attribute table. It's not the way this works. So with vector data, one hint that it's vector data is it's going to have an attribute table. For raster data, it's not. Raster data looks different in the fact that it's going to have raster information. It's composed of columns, rows, number of bands. Each band is just one cell or a set of cells. Bands can be stacked to get around the fact that any given raster band or layer can only have one value. So you see this data, it comes in, and it's going to be plotted in this black and white. You should have somewhere between minus 0.19 and 0.99. And so the low values, again, are going to be water and concrete. The higher values are going to be vegetation. So we're going to do a few things. You can also create charts with raster data, but you're somewhat limited. There's less things that you can do. So the most useful thing here is to create a histogram. So again, you have to specify the number. In this case, you're just going to want to go with band 1. One thing that's useful to do is change the number of bins and see how it changes the way that your data is perceived. A lot of bins, you'll see finer detail. Fewer bins, everything's clumped together, right? So this could be useful when exploring your data a little bit. But what I want to emphasize here is that if we look at this, we can see this data set has something that's called a bimodal distribution. Bimodal meaning two modes. Mode is just like where the concentration of data points are. So we've got this one cluster of high values way up here, and this other cluster of low values down here, and then this sort of valley in between the two, a tail that goes off this way, and an abrupt stop over here. So we are going to do something here where what we want to do is to try and basically classify this raster data, right? So just as you classified the housing or the population data here, you can also classify raster data. Now, one approach would be to go into the symbology and classify it. And you can, do natural breaks here if you want and look at classes. But another approach is to create a completely new raster layer. So when we go into symbology and we classify, it just changes the way the data looks, but it doesn't do anything to the underlying data. With raster data, one thing that we can do is search for a tool Reclassify. And so if you search for Reclassify, you can select this 3D Analyst tool and put the raster value in. And if you click this Classify button, it will pull up a lot of the different classification schemes. So we want to go with natural breaks. Natural breaks is not always the best choice, but it's a nice choice for a first go at things if you don't have a good reason to do something else. So as intro level users, you can just kind of go ahead with natural breaks for now. So what we want to try and do here is basically there's like 3 different areas in Metro Vancouver. We've got, or at least as far as the NDVI value is concerned. And we can see that kind of looking at this histogram here. So we've got this cluster of high values, which is forest, these low values, which is either water or say downtown, right? You can see that as far as the NDVI data is concerned, like these industrial areas in the downtown east side, Hastings Street, all that, the train tracks and everything, they look, as far as NDVI is concerned, pretty similar to the water, right? So these peaks, this peak here is either water or high density urban. And then this spot in between, these values are more like medium density urban, right? So you can see like we've got these streets where, you know, the streets might have some asphalt in the middle, but then there's trees on the side, and then there's houses which have asphalt on the roofs, but green lawns. So there's a mix of values throughout here, right? So that's what this is responsible for. So we just want to group things into 3 classes, basically. So if we click classify, and we choose natural breaks, and then we choose 3, it should show us its best guess at what 3 classes turn out to be. And so 1 is going to be the low values, 2 is going to be the middle values, and 3 is going to be the high values. And so you'll see that this is what the end result looks like. And if you're familiar with the geography of Vancouver, this should kind of make sense, right? Obviously, water, obviously, forest, and then urban areas with a mix of trees and residential homes and stuff like that. And so once you get this classification set up, you can type over it if you want. Once you get this classification set up, if you want to, say, change the symbology, you can give it a new label, for instance. So we could call this water/urban. We could call this medium density residential. And we could call this green vegetation. Right. And you note that they should pop up there once you hit enter, and now you can kind of keep track of things, right? And so those break values that the natural breaks selection chose, right? The bottom for number 1, the sort of lowest value. This is like the minimum NDVI value, and this is sort of the upper bound of the urban class. And then this is the sort of next one up, the lower bound of the medium density to the upper bound, right? So start and end would be the sort of lower bound and upper bound of the values that make up each of these classes.